Hello, and welcome to this series of videos on the TI-30XS calculator. My name is Becky McGuffin, and I'm a math instructor with the Heartland Adult Education Consortium. The goal of this series of videos is to teach you how to get the maximum benefit out of your calculator on test day. When I tutor students, I always begin by asking them how comfortable they are with the calculator. And they almost always reply, "Oh yes, Miss Becky, I know how to use the calculator." But as I work with them, I find they really only knew how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. I often hear, "I didn't know the calculator would do that," after I show them one of the calculator functions. In this series, we'll go over exponent buttons, scientific notation, fractions, percents, even the store and variable buttons that you'll be able to use for more challenging algebra problems like those you'll find on the GED. If possible, I suggest you have one of the calculators in your hand as we go through these videos. That will allow you to practice each of the keystrokes as we go through different examples. This journey may be long, but I promise it will be rewarding and you will learn something about your calculator before we finish. So let's begin.
Let's first discuss the meaning of exponents and squaring a number. When you see 5 squared, what does that mean? Many people mistakenly think it is 5 times 2 and give the answer as 10. But it actually means 5 times itself 2 times. 5 times 5 equals 25. If you know your multiplication tables, you won't need the calculator for this type of problem. But we will be using the x squared button for more complicated problems in a future video. Let's type in 5 squared. 5 and the x squared puts the exponent of 2. The x squared button will put that exponent of 2 next to whatever you have typed. We hit enter, we get the answer is 25. If you want to square a negative number, we have to be careful. When you square a negative number, you have to put the negative number in parentheses. If we type negative 3 squared without parentheses, negative 3 squared, and we hit enter, we get negative 9. The calculator is doing 3 times 3 is 9, and then putting the negative or taking the opposite of it. If we want to square negative 3, we have to put negative 3 in parentheses. Then our x squared button will put the exponent of 2. We hit enter, and we get positive 9, because the calculator is taking negative 3 times negative 3, which equals positive 9. So I just caution you, if you have negative numbers that you are trying to square, make sure you are putting them in parentheses. The opposite of squaring a number is taking the square root. These are also known as inverse operations. When you want to find the square root of a number, we are trying to find what number times itself will give that answer. Look at the calculator and notice the green square root symbol above the x squared button. Anytime we need to utilize these green symbols, we have to use the green second key. To enter the square root of a number, first type the second, followed by the x squared. This will put the square root symbol in our screen. Let's try the square root of 64. Second, x squared, and now we have the square root symbol. We can put the number 64 underneath. It's a good habit to move out from underneath the square root symbol before hitting the enter. So we will use the cursor to move out from underneath the square root symbol and then hit the enter, and it tells us 8. If we want to take the square root of 80, we'll do second, our square root symbol, and put 80. We're going to move out and hit enter. The calculator will simplify the square root to 4 times the square root of 5, but that doesn't give us a decimal answer, and sometimes we will need that approximation using the decimal. So this is one of those times where we will use the answer toggle key located just above the enter. If you hit that, it will toggle the answer from 4 times the square root of 5 to 8.944. Once again, that's not an exact answer, but it is a close approximation if we need that on the GED. What if the exponent is some number other than 2? Exponents can be positive or negative whole numbers. They can also be fractions. And we can use the calculator to find the answer to any of these exponents. For exponents that are not 2, we will use the caret button located just above the x squared. Let's use the calculator to find 5 cubed. Type the 5, followed by the caret, and put the exponent of 3. It's a good habit to move the cursor over and back down to the main level. When we hit enter, we get the answer is 125, because 5 times 5 times 5 is 125. Next, let's try 2 to the 4th power. 2, we'll use our caret button and put the exponent of 4. Notice the cursor's flashing up next to the 4, so we're going to move it over and back down to the main line. And we hit enter and we get 16. 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, 8 times 2 is 16. The opposite of cubing a number is to take the cube root. So we can take the cube root using the symbol just above the caret. There is a trick for using this button. We have to type in the index number, that's this number 3, before we hit the second key. So I'm going to clear my calculator, and we type the index number of 3. The second and the caret moves the 3 into the index position and puts the radical symbol there in our screen to put 125 underneath. It's a good habit to move out from underneath the symbol before hitting enter, and we find the answer is 5, because 5 times 5 times 5 was 125. So the opposite, the cube root of 125, will be 5. Now the reason I keep stressing that it's important to move the cursor out from underneath the radical symbol is if I have some additional math after I take the cube root. So let's do this. The cube root, 3, second, caret, 125, and put plus 8. Now notice the plus 8 is also underneath the symbol. So when I hit enter, the calculator adds 125 plus 8 and then takes the cube root of that number. If I wanted to add 8 to the cube root of 125, we want to do 3 second caret 125. We're going to move over before putting our plus 8. And that way the plus 8 is not taking the cube root. The calculator will take the cube root of 125 and get 5, and then add 8 to that number and get 13. So you can see you get two totally different answers if you do not move the cursor out from underneath the square root or the cube root symbol when doing additional math. One additional note regarding exponents: you cannot take the square root of a negative number. This will result in an error on the calculator. It's one of those situations where the result is known as undefined. Math we cannot do. There is no number times itself that results in a negative number. 2 times 2 equals 4, and negative 2 times negative 2 also equals 4. If the index number is even, you will always get an error if you place a negative number under the radical symbol. However, we can find the cube root or any odd index for a negative number. The cube root of negative 125 is equal to negative 5 because negative 5 times negative 5 times negative 5 does result in a negative number. Let's play around with this a little bit on our calculator. If we do the square root of 4, second, my square root symbol, and 4, I'm going to move out and hit enter. I get 2. But if I take the square root of negative 4, second, square root -4, move out, and hit enter, we get an error. We cannot take the square root of -4. Now let's try some things with our cube root. So clear, we want the cube root of 27. Index of 3, second, caret button, 27. Move out and hit enter, we get 3. If I do the cube root of 27, -27, 3, second, cube root, -27. Move out and hit enter, we get -3. Notice we didn't get an error when this index number was odd. Let's try a 4 as our index. 4, second, 16. Move out, enter. I get 2. Positive numbers don't create a problem anytime, but negative numbers do. What about the fourth root, 4, second, -16? There it is. There's that error again. If this number is even, you will get an error if you put a negative number underneath your radical symbol. One other button on the calculator that is related to exponents that I like to show students is the scientific notation button. It's this times 10 to the n button. In science, numbers get really, really large or can be really small, and so scientists have developed a way to write numbers in scientific notation so they don't have to write all the zeros. This is 93 million. The sun is 93 million miles away from the Earth. Written in scientific notation, that number is 9.3 times 10 to the 7th. Now, the calculator will not take this standard notation and change it to scientific notation. But the calculator will take scientific notation and change it to standard notation. So if we type this in our calculator, how we type in scientific notation, we're going to put the number 9.3 and we're going to hit our times 10 to the n. And what it does is it puts times 10 and has the cursor flashing in my exponent spot for me to put whatever exponent I need to know. I can move over and hit enter and I get 9300000. There are 6 zeros there, 6 zeros there. 93 million. So 93 million written in scientific notation is 9.3 times 10 to the 7th. Now, when this might come in handy on the GED is if you have a multiple choice question. For example, let's say there is a question that says the sun is 93 million miles away from the Earth. What is that number written in scientific notation? If you aren't sure how to change it, you can enter all of these multiple choice answers in our calculator. So we'll do the first one, 9.3 times 10 to the 6th power, and hit enter, and we get 93, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 zeros. That's 9,300,000. Not the same answer. So we'll go on to answer B. 9.3 times 10 to the 7th power. Hit enter. We get 930000000. 6 zeros. 93 million. That must be the correct answer. So in a multiple choice situation, you can enter your answer choices and find which one matches the number of standard notation that you are trying to get.
Now it's time to practice. I encourage you to get to know your calculator, get very comfortable with it, and learn as many tips and tricks as you can for your calculator to help you on test day.